Am I live? And looks like the answer is yes, I am live. Is my audio working? It looks like it is. Good. Obviously, if there's anything wrong and anyone is here, please let me know. That includes if my audio isn't going through, if my audio is too quiet, the music is too quiet, or too loud, or anything like that. As you can see, my avatar is a lot better. And yeah. Today, let me move myself over, we'll be playing a game that I made for a class. Based on a project I've worked on for a long time, and something you guys might have seen a little bit in the past. This is where it opens. I probably should have had like a better opening point, but oh well. The reason why today's stream is starting so early is just I plan on going out to help some friends with some things, so we just need to get this kind of out of the way. That said, I also want to make note of the fact that today's stream will probably be a bit shorter than usual. Why is everything frozen? What's wrong? Oh, it's just the avatar thing. Right when I comment that it's better. Naturally, of course. It'll be a bit shorter since this was made for a class. I didn't have a lot of time and I was working on it completely alone. There's a few things I didn't get to do, such as implement the visuals that I have prepared for it. So, if you want to see visuals of the characters in this story game, you can actually check out my website, link is in the description, where we see some of that. Anyways, maybe we should just get started. I'll move some things around. I do have chat available so I can see how that is. Let's now see. Yes. Redwood leaned back in his chair, cracking his neck as he did so. He had been spending the better part of his morning going over charts and numbers, data from his research on the physical growth and development of Pokemon. Beside him, his loyal Timber waited patiently, having already eaten its post-workout meal. Suddenly, the alarm goes off on Redwood's personal Pokedex. Reading the notification, he sees it's time to go out and do the other part of his job. The part that always made him smile, even after grueling hours of looking at data. Introducing the next generation of trainers to their adventure. This first area where you have two options was just something I put in there as a test to see how branching paths and making paths reunite could work. It is ultimately inconsequential, but you get to see more if you pet Timber. Redwood pats Timber's head. Go play up back. I think we are done for the day. I will grab you once I see where I made a error. Will is supposed to be after I. It's supposed to say, I will grab you once I head home, alright? Brr! The little guy hefts his log of wood over his shoulder before jogging through the back door. Redwood smiles, glad he could have such a carefree partner Pokemon. Time to get back to it. No more procrastinating. 3 young, soon-to-be trainers were waiting for Redwood outside. It seemed like the one in the middle, a somewhat tanned kid in a sports jacket, was picking on the one to the left. She was a much smaller kid, who seemed very timid and busy reading her books. The kid on the right looked disinterested, like the other two were a mild annoyance. His hands in his hoodie's pocket, it was clear he would rather not be here. As he came out, Professor Redwood cleared his throat. The left two looked up for a second, then did a double take as they snapped to attention. Internally, Redwood had to laugh. No matter who you were, everyone was always eager to meet their first Pokemon. The kid on the right had seen him come out, and as such had already been watching Redwood attentively. Redwood began his speech. Welcome to the world of Pokemon. I'm assuming that anyone who does play this will have already experienced some Pokemon games, and the beginning of every Pokemon game has you listening to a professor telling a very similar speech. So I just had a you know the rest was my way of letting people know I'm not going to put you through all that nonsense. Players are looking at this kind of not really from Redwood's perspective, but following the perspective of Redwood. There are parts of the game that shift away from Redwood, but for the most part, that's kind of how this game works. So we'll skip past all the Pokemon dialogue. If I ever make more of this game, maybe I'll just have that be another area where it branches. One where you can see the dialogue, see the speech. The other where you can skip over it if you're less interested. Redwood gave his usual speech. He only gets to give it once a year, but having been doing this for several years now, he has had quite the practice delivering it. Knowing some kids are prone to running off as soon as they get their first Pokemon, he offered them the Pokedex first. Then, when the big moment came, he offered the first Pokemon to the shy girl, who he felt deserved it after all the teasing. Then came the reserved kid in the hoodie, and last came the sporty kid. I see another error with capitalization, but oh well. They were all polite enough, and Redwood was glad to see that these were the kinds of people to shape the future of Pokemon. With only his fellow researchers in the room, Redwood stretched and sat back down. It was only a minute before his next notification went off, reminding him that he was meant to go and meet his old friend, Professor Lavender. They had known each other since they were kids, and had grown close through their mutual care for Pokemon well-being over everyone else's interest in Pokemon battles. With another stretch as he got up, Redwood got ready to go. So the point here is that Redwood and Lavender are this region's professors. And unlike just about everyone else, they're not really about Pokemon battles. Most people get their Pokemon and go do the gym challenge and all this stuff, trying to be the very best. Or even if they're not that, it still seems like it's the national pastime of sorts. And I figured that these professors probably would be less interested in that. You can get more information about the professors on the website I made. The link to that is in the description down below. Redwood went out back to grab his timber, hung up his lab coat, and headed over to the same restaurant they go to every week. A fancy place called Crystal Horizon. Normally, Redwood would just go out for a burger, but since he was meeting with his pal outside of work, he liked to take advantage of his success as a Pokemon professor by enjoying the finer things in life. Besides, everyone there was always so warm and welcoming. So this is a professor where his success means that he gets to enjoy the finer things in life and doesn't really need to think about like the implications of it or anything like that. He just gets to. But he isn't like a fancy person. He still, likes a fast food burger. Lavender was waiting outside, like usual. Unlike Redwood, who always wore sweatpants and a black t-shirt when he wasn't in the lab, Lavender wore her lab coat everywhere she went. Always a professional. However, there was something different about her today. Redwood couldn't quite place a finger on it. They head inside. So one of the things you might notice is quite a few times I'm mentioning his having an alert go off, a notification. Kind of trying to emphasize that Redwood is a very organized, everything is on a schedule, he's in a routine, things don't really change in his day-to-day life. As always, so this is a bit longer. As always, Redwood ordered a steak. He might not be going to a burger joint, but he's still stuck to his protein-rich diet. Again, this is due to the fact that he's supposed to be a researcher who studies physical growth. He's kind of like his lab is literally like a gym that people can go to. But yeah, Lavender spent some time looking at the menu before asking for a salad and water. Once the food was ordered, the two began talking as old friends do, laughing about recent incidents in their labs, teasing one another, and talking a little about their research. I'm going to be making a lot of side notes. The point of this is to show that Lavender is basically trying to get the cheapest option. Unlike Redwood, who is experiencing financial success, she's been struggling. Lavender studied the emotional and mental health of Pokemon. Recently, her focus shifted towards psychic types, whose powers can do strange things when they become unstable. Redwood's research was currently looking at the ties between physical exertion and evolution. When I sent the Elite Four my grant request outlining my research, they even sent down one of them to set the funding in person. I didn't really know how to word that better, but I had to get it. At this, Lavender started to clam up. She looked hurt, and Redwood didn't understand why. Suddenly it occurred to him what was different. Lavender had been smiling. Now that her smile was gone, Redwood wanted to kick himself for not realizing it sooner. So, how has your research been doing? I bet they were excited to see what you had on psychic types. I mean, after all, they canceled my funding. Redwood did not expect that. He thought he misheard her at first. They cut your funding? Yep. After I got the news, I went out to meet with them. Even spoke to the champion herself. They said my research was not a priority, and that they need to put the funding elsewhere for the sake of the region. But your lab, I can only afford to keep it going for another month or so. After that, unless I can find private funding, me and my research staff will have to seek outside employment. Half the team already left. They sat in silence. When their food came, they thanked the waiter awkwardly and ate in silence. Well, Redwood couldn't take much more of it. What are you gonna do? You know, if you need to, you can always join your lab with mine. No? Lavender looked ready to cry. At your lab, all the research goes towards fitness. I don't want to study fitness. Redwood, expecting this, wasn't hurt at all. He knew where Lavender's passion lay. And besides, not all hope is lost. Really? I know it's not the most well written. I'm not really much of an author. But you know, I've been doing my best here. I'll be heading to Eclipse City this week, or this weekend. I plan to meet with a few investors. I won't be back for over a week. A moment passed, then Redwood slapped his knee. By Arceus, Lavender, what's with this doom and gloom? That's great news. I mean, I haven't met with anyone yet. They might not even go for it. Nonsense! Eclipse City, you're going straight to the corporate hotshots. And let me tell you this, they won't have any of that government paperwork getting in the way of your research. Lavender smiled again, faintly, letting out a reserved chuckle. I suppose. We ought to be celebrating. Waiter, a bottle of Arcanine Rogue Reserves. Worry flashed back on her face. Oh no, I can't. Nonsense. It'll be my treat. Don't even worry about it. But it's so much, and we deserve it. What's the point of spending all our time in those cold laboratories if we can't let loose now and again, and enjoy the fruits of our labor? The two spent the rest of the night laughing and talking like before, a fresh bouncy of merriment in the air. At the end of the night, Redwood wished her good luck in Eclipse City, knowing he wouldn't see her for a whole week. While Lavender was away, they couldn't really talk like they did before. To fill the time he would have spent at Crystal Horizon, He instead spent eating with a coworker from his own lab. A man who had been with him for a while, Dr. Charlie Everest. It was some fun, but Redwood could tell that Charlie saw these outings as time to get close to the boss rather than hang out. Then Lavender came back. She was held up for longer than expected, but when she returned, her smile practically glowed. Over their dinners, Redwood learned that she had spoken to a few companies, with little luck, before she met with some group called Dark Horizon Dynamics, some small company that produced medication for trainers. Redwood was surprised he hadn't heard of them, considering how close he works with the region's Pokemon centers in his research, but figured it was probably because they focused on treatments sold to trainers directly. Then Lavender dropped a much bigger surprise. I think they actually work with the Elite Four directly. I should probably get rid of that directly. What makes you think that? After my first meeting with the CEO, Mr. Blackthorn, I saw who his next appointment was with, and you would never believe it, but it was with Lilith. No way, you're pulling my leg. What kind of business would she even have with a company that sold low-grade commercial potions? I don't know, but I swear I saw her. I even spoke with her for a bit. She said she recognized me from my grant request and hoped I was doing fine despite the League's decision. That was the last dinner they had together before it was the end of the year's first quarter. So I don't know a whole lot about the more common practices when it comes to scientists presenting their data. Also, I'm seeing something that's annoying me. Let me just filter. 10, 20. There we go. That fixed it. Okay. But I kind of looked a little bit into it, and I didn't have a lot of time because, like I said, I had to make some last-minute changes with this game's direction. Previously, it was gonna have nothing to do with my Pokemon project, but I was just so much more passionate about this, I decided to shift gears, as it were. Redwood was not a big fan of the quarterly reviews. He enjoyed working out alongside his Pokemon and seeing them grow strong as a result, but all the paperwork and presentations of his findings bored him. Perhaps it would be different if he could meet them in person, so he could lean on his passion to make his presentation more bearable. But as it was, he had to present it all in a written document. As the head researcher of his lab, he had to present not only his own findings, but the results of his fellow researchers as well. He had been working on it for several hours now, and had begun to doze off when a notification went off and jolted him awake. Swearing to himself, Redwood quickly went looking for his timber, said goodbye to some researchers pulling late hours, and headed out to Crystal Horizon. It was much colder out this time of year, and he couldn't wait to get inside and enjoy a warm meal. However, when he got there, Lavender wasn't waiting outside like she usually does. This never happens. Redwood furrowed his brow as he sat outside waiting for her. The staff offered to let him wait at his usual table, but he politely declined. No sense for getting started without Lavender. Fortunately, he did not have to wait much longer. Missing a word there. When she showed up, her hair was a mess and her glasses askew, and she had clearly been just as busy as he has. Not wanting to stand around in the cold, the two finally went inside and ordered their meals. He had a steak and she had 2 glasses of Arcanine Rogue Reserves and a bourguignon. I think that's how that's pronounced. It's a kind of stew. That's why I chose it. And Redwood raised an eyebrow. My treat. To make up for being late and as a thank you for when I left for Eclipse. So everything here has a purpose. Her being late and the emphasizing that that's not common is supposed to show that something is off. Things are a little bit different. The staff offering to let him wait at his usual table is showing that he is enough of a regular that he has a positive relationship with the restaurant and its staff. They kind of expect him to be there. Um, and her ordering the expensive wine and actual meal instead of just a salad is meant to represent a sudden and extreme shift in her financial disposition. The two ate and talked and laughed before conversation inevitably turned towards work. I can't stand these reports. Every quarter it's the same thing, detailing numbers that they probably don't even understand. That bad, huh? I can't even begin to describe it. I spent all day today and yesterday on it, and there still is more data I need to go over, summarize, and prepare. A sip of the wine and Redwood relaxed once more. And what about you? Your presentation done or as used as slogged as I am? Lavender laughed, something she had been doing more often as of late. I don't work for the League anymore, remember? It's like you once said, less paperwork to get in the way. She finished her glass as well and then continued. Actually, that's not entirely true. I'll be heading out in a week or so to present my findings, which much less paperwork. Instead, I have to go and deliver my research in person. Oh, what I wouldn't give. Actually, that's why I was... Actually, that was why I was late today. I just got off the phone with someone from their R&D department, and I only found out about it today. I got so caught up in getting all my research together, I completely spaced out on what day it was. The two continued their meal, laughing about their woes, and before they parted ways, they offered one another good luck on presenting their findings. I think is around here we're gonna see a shift of perspective. Yeah. Now instead of following Redwood, just for a little bit, we will be following Lavender. Weeks pass, and Lavender finds itself once more in the locally known City of Twilight Towers. Eclipse City was large, made up of skyscrapers of reddish glass and orange-painted steel. The buildings were so closely clustered that, despite being midday, the streets would be left dark without the numerous lights that lined them. Nervous, Lavender once more reviewed the notes in the folder she brought with her, and double-checked that her computer held the slides that she meticulously prepared. Though she had been here before, this time around felt different. The waiting room was much higher in the tower than before, decorated purple and gold. At the desk sat a small woman in a black dress skirt. She typed away at the monitor. Lavender had tried to ask about who she'd be meeting today, since it clearly wasn't going to be Mr. Blackthorn. The lady simply glanced up at her and told her that he would be there soon. I kind of wanted to make this part feel like it's very desensitized, depersonalized, all those fancy words. The ticking of the clock didn't help her nerves. Lavender had gotten there early. Nope. Pardon me. Let's see. Lavender had gone there early, always eager to make a positive impression, and the scheduled time of their meeting had come and gone. But anytime she stood up, she got that same tired response. Please sit, you will be here soon. Lavender was not the sort to get mad, but she was about ready to just leave. She gathered her things one last time when, finally, the elevator at the end of the room dinged and opened. Out stepped, that's supposed to be 2 as in the number, my bad. Out stepped 2 figures. Breathing a sigh of relief, Lavender stood up to greet them. But before she could, she was frozen in place from realizing who stood before her. The last people she could have ever expected. The man wore ripped jeans and a black hoodie, pulled up over his head. Of his face, she could see his frown surrounded by the wrinkles of old age. Though one might mistake him for a homeless man at first, There was no hope for forgiveness from the man before her. It was the man who was the champion of the Elite Four, dethroned 10 years prior by the current champion. Supposedly he was retired, enjoying the pleasures afforded such a long career. Error there. So, I don't quite like how I've written it, but the point of that was that I know that there's that saying of like, oh, you'd be forgiven for thinking blah blah blah. My idea was, a normal person might forgive you for thinking that, but this is not a person who has forgiveness. The woman besides Cain, a second. Occurs to me I also probably should have put his name in the previous passage. The woman beside Cain could not be mistaken so easily. Her red suit was tidy as always. The current Elite Four member Lilith followed him, a notepad of her own in her hands as she spoke about some kind of resource allocation. Cain silenced Lilith by raising I finger? Why does that say I finger? That should be a finger. Or whatever. By raising a finger. Now looking down on the purple-haired professor who meekly stood before him. You must be Lavender. I'm sorry. I'm supposed to be seeing someone? I'm a researcher for Dark Horizon. I know. Let's go into my office. With that, the two imposing figures brushed past her and made their way through the doors, not even bothering to acknowledge the secretary, who had hurriedly opened the doors for them. Following them in, Lavender uttered a silent thank you to the lady before going into the next room. The room was cold. Colder than her laboratory. The room was also darker, despite the large windows and the lighting. Behind Cain, as he sat at a large black desk, the sun was setting, making a red halo around his head. Lilith sat off to the side, diligently taking notes. On what, Lavender could only guess. Cain's hood was pulled down, revealing his short gray hair and weary eyes. He sat, watching Lavender silently, fingertips pressed together as he watched her like a snake waiting to pounce. She took a shaky breath before speaking. I prepared a few slides too. Do you recall the points you had on it? Once more taken off guard, she thought for a moment. Yeah, I took the time to commit them to then the slides are not needed. I'm sorry. Lavender was getting agitated. She spent too much time on those slides, just let them go like that. Before we continue, can you tell me what is going on? I'm supposed to be working for Mr. Blackthorne? Cain sighed deeply, barely waving his finger to Lilith for her to talk. Mr. Blackthorne is no longer with us. He quit, but that doesn't... He was fired. It was discovered that Mr. Blackthorne disagreed with the direction of the organization, and as such was deemed a waste of resources to keep him under our employ. I don't understand. Wasn't he the CEO? He was. And now he is not. That is all you need to know on that matter, as anything else will be above your pay grade. Now please continue presenting your research to Cain, so we may move on. Lilith went back to writing in her journal. That's supposed to be on her notepad, not in her journal. I don't know why that mistake happened. My mouse is acting weird. Still confused, Lavender didn't see any choice but to move forward. Well, my research focuses on the emotional and Again, Cain interjected. We know what your field of study is. What is your current research? Again, side note, I know that that's not the most well-written, but I'm really trying to emphasize Cain's impatience here. Lavender clenched and unclenched her fist, then continued. Right now, my team and I are studying the detrimental effects that continuous strain can have on psychic Pokemon, who have been known to manifest their powers differently depending on their state of being. As you know, Psyduck in particular... Yes, I know about Psyduck's headaches. Move on to the next point. What are these effects on the Pokemon? Well, to start, they tend to rely more heavily on base instinct. They become harder to control, become much more aggressive, and their psychic powers can, in extreme cases, cause harm in people and Pokemon around them. To prevent this, my team and I have been... Yet again, she's interrupted. I see. This is interesting. Lilith stopped writing to look at Kane. So, to summarize, they act quicker, become stronger, and harm others. Lavender didn't know what to say. I mean, in layman's terms, I suppose that's an accurate summation of, and how do you study this? Pardon me? How do you study the psychic Pokemon to get your results? Do you need to aggravate them yourself, or what? Lavender's supposed it made sense to ask. It was natural to be concerned with the ethics of her research, considering what it entails. Oh, I assure you, sir, the Pokemon are not harmed. We first acquire the appropriate... That's supposed to say permissions. The appropriate permissions, and then put them through either a series of physical or mental trials that are designed to be unfair and demanding. And afterwards, we reward them appropriately. Kane slumped his shoulders. I see. Well, from now on, we'll be shifting your research focus. He started to stand up. Once he was on his feet, he continued. I want you to halt your research on, that's supposed to be 2 words, on negating these effects and preventing the Pokemon from being aggravated. But that's, from now on, I want you to research more efficient ways of reaching this heightened state of aggravation. Your old team will be paid severance and replaced with researchers from our organization to aid you in this transition. You can't just, I expect to hear results in our next meeting. Lilith, give her the new details pertaining to her employment. He walked out, the meeting over much sooner than Lavender could have expected. Lilith silently wrote some more, handed her a piece of paper, and told her she can leave when she is ready. Before Lilith left the room to follow up to Kane, she simply said, "Congrats on your promotion." So far it has been very linear, but we're about to reach the point where this game becomes less of a graphic novel, not even graphic, just a novel, and more into like a choose your own adventure style kind of game. In a little bit. Redwood looked down at his... So we're back to Redwood's kind of narrative here. Redwood looked down at his meal. There's another break in the conversation and the silence was discomforting. Ever since Lavender returned from giving her report to her new benefactor, Redwood has hardly had a moment to speak with her. She hasn't been able to make she hasn't been able to make any of their weekly dinners, and Redwood missed their talks. In her absence, he had taken to having dinner with a different researcher each week. He saw it as an opportunity to strengthen his bonds with his co-workers, but it wasn't the same. Today it was a researcher named Dr. Olivia Thornfield. She used to work for Lavender Labs, but... So, what happened at the other lab? I never really got the whole story. Dr. Thornfield finished her water and sighed. The day before Lavender returned, some guy came in and announced that there was a change in management. Apparently, Lavender Labs was absorbed into that company she started working for. Dark Horizon? That's the one. He spoke with each researcher one-on-one, took each of us into a room set aside for him. She took another bite of her pudding before continuing. When it was my turn, everyone already realized that he was firing everyone. Why else would every single person get sent home? Why even bother speaking with each person independently? She shrugged. I figured they were trying to find something, but when it was my turn, he just asked me some basic questions about my time here and gave me some corporate mumbo-jumbo. Let's see. At least we weren't moved out of the city. I like it here. Which reminds me, thanks for offering me a position at Redwood Labs. Oh, please, I couldn't let so many brilliant minds go to waste. That's supposed to say not. It's not fair. Besides, it's not fair to just kick all of you to the streets. Oh, I think we would have been just fine, laughed Thornfield. How so? Right, I suppose you didn't hear about it. I guess Dark Horizon's doing pretty well, because they gave everyone a surprisingly large severance package. This was the first time Redwood had heard of this. I myself was given like a year's salary worth. When I was looking into how much severance packages usually are, it seemed like it was usually like, at best, 2 or 3 weeks of pay. So I was like, this would be a very big, extreme, unreasonably large amount of money that instantly should be raising eyebrows. But at the same time, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have made it so big. Maybe I should have just said like a month's worth, but I wanted it to be, I want it to really showcase how much money this company has. Well, that explains why so many of his new researchers offered to pay for the meals. And have you heard from Lavender? Another bite, another sip, and another sigh. Not a word. She was always reclusive, but since then I don't think she has gone anywhere but to and from the lab. I should say since coming back. Now that I think about it, that would have better. For the rest of the meal, Redwood thought about whether he should pay Lavender a visit or let her be. Here's the first area where the story starts to really branch into different paths. I'm going to be taking you guys through what I would say is the canonical path, since this is kind of meant to be a prequel to the actual game that I've been working on. And in that, he will pay Lavender a visit. Redwood took a deep breath. He hasn't been to Lavender's apartment in a long time. He couldn't even remember the last time he had been here. Before approaching the door, he took one final look around to really take in the residential complex. The buildings were identical to one another. Each was a 2-story concrete block, the only difference between them being what little the people living there did to the space immediately in front of their own doorways. It was apparent from a quick glance that the individual homes were not particularly large, designed more for efficiently compacting space than comfort. Again, to emphasize that Lavender has had her career has not been as successful as his. Even though she recently started making more money, she's already been living here long enough that she doesn't just want to move on a whim. Lavender's apartment was on the 2nd floor. Her space is decorated with a small plant thriving much better than any of the neighbors. A small chair and an even smaller table with a coaster and an unlit candle. Through the windows, Redwood could see only the closed blinds, whose color shared their name with the woman who put them there. As in Lavender. At first, Redwood had tried to meet with Lavender at her lab, but whenever he went there, he was faced with that should be worded differently. He was faced with some person, maybe? I don't know. He was faced with some face he didn't recognize, who told him Lavender was busy. Redwood doubted these people even bothered to bring her the messages he tried to leave her. When he tried calling her, the call would drop before anyone could pick up. Something was definitely wrong. Another breath. This was silly. They'd been friends for years. There's nothing wrong with wanting to see what was up with his old pal, or wanting to make sure nothing was wrong. Heck, it was probably some misunderstanding. The new guys are probably fine, just not used to the local area and unfamiliar with its inhabitants. With these last few thoughts of reassurance, Redwood knocked. A moment passed. Then another. Was this the wrong apartment? It had been years. Maybe he should have tried catching her on her way to work. Or a loud snap of a lock turning, and the door opened a crack. Redwood could see an eye, but the creature looking back at him wasn't Lavender. No, this poor thing was scared and alone and tired. The voice that came out was cracked, as though she'd been crying. Redwood? What are you doing here? Hey, Lavs. I was just in the neighborhood and wanted to check up on you. Can I come in? The two stared at each other for a few seconds, until she conceded and opened the door. Of course, just don't mind the mess. Redwood held back a chuckle. He knew Lavender was always so meticulous about everything. She probably had like a single dish in the sink or had left some of her books out on the table. He was always the messy one. But then he stepped through the doorway and saw that this house was far from her usual standard. It wasn't just dishes and books. The room looked like it had been ransacked. The table was on its side and papers strewn about all over. Lavender's Pokemon, Chansey, was out of its Pokeball trying to help tidy the place by sweeping up the kitchen area. Behind Redwood, Lavender looked around outside before closing and locking her door once more. Lavs, if I knew you were coming, hey, talk to me. Lavender dropped her blatant facade, just looking at her friend for a moment, before curling up with her back to the door, arms covering her face. It's a mess. It's just a living space. I'm sure we can. That's not what I mean. Redwood had never seen her like this. I messed up. I never should have gone to those horrible people. Is this about Dark Horizon? Listen, I understand it must be rough adapting to a corporate situation, but if it is that bad, we could just wait out the contract and... No, I can't. Why? Lavs, I need you to talk to me. What's going on? The two were silent for a while. Lavender was drawing the strength to open up while Redwood waited patiently, knowing his friend was hurting and needed time. Lavender took a shaky breath, then another, and started talking once more. They asked me to change my research. Redwood stayed silent, knowing there had to be more to it. I wanted to help Pokemon who were hurting, but they asked me to start looking into causing them pain. Well, that was odd. Why would a pharmaceutical company... It's all a lie, Lavender is shouting now, her eyes red and puffy. Last time I went out there, I met with... Oh, it doesn't matter. You wouldn't believe me anyways. No one would. Why do you think I wouldn't believe you? Silence. Laughs. It doesn't matter who. Redwood raised his hands in conceit, seeing at this point wouldn't get him anywhere. And even if it did matter, I can't tell you. You should leave. After all this, Lavender wants him to just leave. This could be his last chance to find out what's wrong. I'm gonna go with the second option, where he sticks around. Lavs, I'm not leaving you until I know what's wrong. You could get hurt. If there's something illicit going on, we could always speak to the League. The blood drained from her face. Don't. Please, just... We can't go to the League. Then tell me what's wrong. Why would I be in trouble? Why would they ask you to research methods of hurting Pokemon? Lavender breathed in one last time, and began telling Redwood everything. Dark Horizon was a cover-up. The money was coming from some secretive underground organization. This group apparently had numerous companies under their thumb, each used to hide their activities. And now Lavender was in their payroll. Their reach extended beyond the restraints of corporate ladders. They had control of people across the region. That's supposed to be gym. Multiple gym leaders and even one of the Elite Four. The only name that Lavender gave was the ex-champion Kane, who was using his supposed retirement as a means of hiding their activity. He was the one pulling the strings. Even with all the odd things that had been going on with his friend, Redwood had a hard time believing what he heard. This was not something she would joke about, and it did explain the unusual disposition of the new researchers barring him from entering his friend's laboratory. Halfway through her recounting all she had been dealing with, Redwood had to sit down on the couch, with his hand to his head, and another kicker surprised him. They want me to go back to the city. Don't go. You need to distance yourself from those people. I don't have a choice. If I don't do as they say... Redwood didn't know what the consequences were, and he was afraid to ask. So instead, he offered a different solution. Let me help. No. Come on, you can't seriously be thinking of dealing with all this on your own. This was my mistake, and I will fix it. Redwood had to decide whether he would help her would let her go alone, or if he would insist on helping. I figured he probably shouldn't just let her go alone, since this is not the kind of problem that can be fixed on your own. So for the true ending, he needs to insist on helping. Lavender was thankful for his support, but still worried. How are you going to help? I have an idea, but you need to give it a chance. I know it seems bleak, but we have to do something. When she fell silent, Redwood put an arm around his friend for comfort. It's going to be okay. Okay, she whispered. What should we do? Redwood thought about it. He decided there were two routes he could take. He could either hope the League was safe enough to approach and request an audience with them. He knew some of them personally and was certain he could see them. Alternatively, he could go with Lavender when she goes to Eclipse City. Sure, it was risky to deal with such people, but if he could get them to leave Lavender alone until they could get under protection, he could go to the League with confidence that she would be kept safe, even if the worst case scenario came to be. Here's another area where it might seem unintuitive what the true ending is, but the true ending does require that instead of going to the League, you go to Eclipse City to deal with them directly. It's been a month. Redwood now stood outside the meeting place, an old abandoned building that was once the city's gym. Eclipse City has evolved into a hub of big businesses. Not Finn. So a hub of big businesses, and it was determined best for the region, both for its financial longevity and for the safety of kids taking the gym challenges, that the gym route be redirected away from here. Lavender had to go on ahead of Redwood so they could set up this meeting, and since then she's only been able to keep Redwood up to date through calls and texts. Redwood checked the address one last time, despite the unmistakable nature of this location. If not for the video calls, he would have been more worried about his friend's well-being. Supposedly, here he would meet the man in charge, and Lavender would be waiting with him inside. The messages say that it would only be the three of them. The notification he set goes off, letting Redwood know it was time. That's supposed to say with. With a deep breath, he opens the door to the abandoned gym. The gym was dark, but there was enough light to see coming in. I need to rearrange some of these words. There's enough light coming in to see, or there's enough light coming in through the boarded up windows to see. The once pristine walls now covered in gang signs and spray paint. The room was a mockery of the, authority and power it once commanded. Fitting to the dark parallel, standing where the gym leader once stood, was an old man in dark, tattered clothes. If not for Lavender, standing meekly behind the figure, Redwood would have thought this some homeless man using the gym for refuge from the outside. The man spoke. Hello, Professor Redwood. It's an honor to meet you at last. I have heard quite a bit about you from my associates. Redwood took a second to formulate his words, knowing that he couldn't show any signs of weakness. Not here, not now. I'm afraid I can't say the same about you. Last I heard, you were supposed to be retired. Other than that, no one has much to say about the old champion. Beneath his hood, Kane's faint smile came to an end. Seems he didn't like that much. I assure you, I have been most busy during my retirement. So I have gathered. But this hardly seems fitting for a retired champion. Lavender flinched at this, already anticipating Kane's retribution. Kane pulled down his hood, venom in his eyes. Hearing he was talking to Kane, and seeing him stand before him, seeing him stand before him, undeniably, in the flesh, was a different matter. Up to this point, a part of Redwood was hoping Lavender had been mistaken, but here he was. And now, Kane's full attention was turned to Redwood, with a force of presence that made Redwood regret coming. Enough. We aren't here so some researcher can judge me. You came to me so you could beg me to revoke Lavender's contract. Redwood was expecting a much more aggressive response. Looking the man up and down, he knew that if it came to fisticuffs, Redwood would have the advantage. A big man who works out every day, and someone who has studied physical development, this scrawny old man wouldn't last a minute. But Kane was probably aware of this. That's right. Lavender shouldn't be a part of whatever it is you're doing. Her research has always been for improving lives, and you... Enough idealistic babble. You aren't some movie hero. And I'm your only audience. I don't give a crap what she does with her research. But as long as she works for me, I'm gonna get my money's worth. Now, without your talk about morals and justice, why should I not end your life here now? This was not the turn Redwood was hoping for. But it wasn't entirely unexpected. I'm a well-known professor who works the League themselves and have stations at Pokemon centers all around the region. People know I came here, and even if they didn't know the reason I came, I can assure you the fallback that would be caused by the investigations of my disappearance would make life a whole lot harder for you. Kane smiled once more as Lavender's shoulders sank. Oh, well then. If you work with the League, I guess I've no choice but to cave into your demands. Redwood stayed silent, knowing Kane wanted him to speak so he could be further degraded by the old champion. Lilith already told him that the League was, at least partially, under Kane's thumb. But Redwood also knew that Kane couldn't have complete control. As much influence as he had, Redwood realized that his own threat still held enough weight to keep Kane at bay. At least for now. Otherwise, this meeting would have never happened. A few moments of this silent stalemate, Kane finally spoke again. I'll tell you what. I'll give you a choice. Face me in the matter fitting this gym's heritage, an old-fashioned Pokemon battle. I'll even use your friend's Pokemon to keep things fair. Lavender looked to Kane in shock, as did Redwood. Commanding other people's Pokemon was already a big deal, and he had said it without even considering whether Lavender would comply. When I win, you can leave completely unharmed. Redwood clenched his fist. Unlike most people, he and Lavender never got into Pokemon battling. In fact, they specifically became researchers because they disliked it so. What about Lavender? We can discuss the end of Lavender's employment to my organization if you win. And if I don't play along, then either you find something else to entice me, or I have my Pokemon break your bones and send you home in a casket and a note saying you were mugged in a back alley. Redwood didn't know whether this threat carried any weight. But even if it didn't, it was clear there weren't many ways out of this. He pulled out his Timber's ball and whispered an apology to his very underprepared friend before sending him out. Kane smiled, and the whole room seemed to lean in on itself, as though excited to finally get to be used for its purpose after years of silence. Not even bothering to look at her, he held out his hand to Lavender. Your Chansey, miss. With a shaky hand, she pulled her Pokemon's ball out from her coat. She opened her mouth as though to say something, but Kane grabbed her Pokeball and sent it out. Chansey looked confused at first, as confused as Timber on the other side of the room, while Kane cracked his neck. Chansey, you will listen to what I tell you. or your weak excuse of a trainer will face something a lot worse than working for me. At first, the pink blob cried out for Lavender with tears in its eyes. Lavender cried back, "Just do it, Chansey. Soon it'll be over and we can go home." Kane rolled his eyes. Chansey turned to face the timber. Someone who had someone who she had played with on many occasions. It was now or never. Either the timber would win, or the Chansey would take it down. There are very different endings that I would recommend you check out later. Maybe you could play this game yourself. But for the true ending, Chansey needs to win. Kane's commands were cold, devoid of emotion as he commanded protect, charm, take down, and sing, taking full advantage of Chansey's bulk and controlling the field to devastating effect. Redwood hadn't asked Timber to fight in years. Kane was a master who had been on top back when Redwood was still a kid. The conclusion of the battle was as decisive as it was inevitable. Well, this was disappointing, Professor. Redwood held back tears unsuccessfully. Please see reason. You can't do this. Kane just smiled. I would suggest you leave now. I'm a very busy man. Oh, and no more calling Lavender. I'm afraid she'll be too busy moving forward to make any of your little dinner dates. No, I won't leave. That's what to say without Lavender. Without Lavender. Kane's smile folded, and without any prompting, a red light flashed as one of his own Pokemon, a Dusk Noir, came out of its ball. I would recommend you reconsider. My kindness and patience wears thin very quickly these days. With nothing left, Redwood looked to Lavender. She mouths the words, "It's okay," her eyes as wet as his own. Truly defeated, Redwood turned around and walked out. Kane called out one last thing before he left. Don't worry. I know you plan on going to the League. I have already made plans to deal with them. Kane laughed as the door to the old Eclipse City gym closed behind him. This is the beginning of the prologue, and then we'll get to the end screen. It's been several months. Life has changed significantly. As Kane suspected, Redwood immediately went to the League, but despite their best efforts, all trace of Kane and his work have disappeared. The company, Dark Horizon Dynamics, had shut down. Lavender was never seen or heard from. Redwood still worked at his lab, but now he always had a security team with him. Even as he taught the next generation of trainers, men and women in black suits stood nearby, ready to intervene if something was off. As a part of the new program, in an effort to keep new trainers safe, Kane had to change his old speech to now include a warning, telling new trainers to become aware of the criminals who had started appearing around the region, sporting a symbol with a distinct F, calling themselves the Forsaken Grunts of Kane. Redwood no longer goes to dinners, even with his coworkers. It was determined that's supposed to be too great a security risk. Now he spends his nights at home alone, with only his timber to keep him company. Everything had changed. True ending. And then there's a little thing to get back to the start. And that's the game. If you want to learn more about the much larger Pokemon project and see images of all the characters and some of the Pokemon, as well as play this game for yourself, check the website, the link to which is down below. This game hasn't been added to it yet, but I plan on doing that basically over the weekend. On another note, this month's art event has finally come to a start, as the poll has ended, and the winner of the poll was to have the events be drawing your winter persona, or your winter sona, if you were. That can be interpreted in many different ways. Later today, I will be officially starting the event on the server. The link to that Discord server is in the description down below. Check it out. You know, I would love to see more artists participating in our monthly events. Other than that, I do streams or videos every Friday, usually at 1 o'clock, but today I had to do it a bit earlier. And with that, oh yeah, finally I wanted to just thank anyone who does watch this. Each and every last one of you means so much to me, and I can't even begin to express my gratitude. Now with that, I'm gonna have to bid you adieu, say goodbye, farewell, and all that jazz. Do the YouTube nonsense, liking and subscribing and all that. Until next time, I will see you next time. That didn't make sense. Oh well.